I have just a couple of observations before we start.
That's a nice setup.
You know, when I graduated from law school, if I had really thought about it, I would have become a water attorney. There is not a decision made about water in California that isn't a good subject for lawsuit. It is a gold mine. Unfortunately, my days are gone. I also would like to give you a brief quote from Mark Twain. I think some of you have heard it. And that is, whiskey is for drinking and water is for fighting. And Mark Twain said that probably well over 100 years ago, and my, how right he is. But we have a major fight. It's called a drought, and after the drought it's called the Twin Tunnels, and possibly after that there will be some more thoughts that go into what happens with our water today in California. I'm here tonight to introduce Shauna Lorance, who she's gone around and said that she works for me. She does work as the Chief Administrative Officer, the General Manager of the San Juan Water District, which is a wholesale and retail water purveyor with an arm in what's left of Folsom Lake. Shauna graduated from UCD with a degree in mechanical engineering. She is a licensed civil engineer in California, and she also holds a degree as a certified special district administrator. I don't know how many of you know, and Shauna may get into this, but the San Juan Water District is a special services district, which includes water and a number of other things, and you may want to ask her about that. She's also on the Board of Governors of the Association of California Water Agencies. She's an alternate member on the board of the National Water Resources Association, and she's on the California State University's Water Resource and Policy Advisory Committee. As if that isn't enough, Shauna is married to Ron. She has 3 children, 2 grandchildren, 1 dog and 1 cat. So she's a very busy person. She still finds plenty of time to devote her time in our behalf to trying to provide reliable water as a wholesaler to the Fair Oaks Water District, but to other water districts in the northeast portion of this county and carrying over into Placer County. Shauna, come on up and you can fill in any of the gaps that I've left.
I think you got it pretty well covered. What I'm here today is, I know you guys had a presentation from Lester Snow, I think it's been about a month or so ago, where he did the big California water overview. What I'm here doing today is kind of that intermediate approach, which is the in-between regional approach. And then in December, you guys will have the general manager from Fair Oaks Water District here to discuss the direct implications to Fair Oaks. I know Tom Gray's in the back, so he will be able to go right after me in December to give you guys some more detailed information. So one of the first questions we had, and I noticed was on the website, is why in the world are there 2 water districts in this little tiny area we all have over here? Well, the main reason is because way back before Folsom Dam was built, Citrus Heights, Fair Oaks, and Orangevale were getting water from a private company called the North Fork Ditch Company. And they were going to build Folsom, and it was going to inundate all of their facilities. So those people were very intelligent. They got together and they decided, rather than each one of us trying to have a contract with the Corps of Engineers or Bureau of Reclamation, how about if we all created a new district and had that district supply the water supply to the other agencies? So they created a district by vote of the people that I'll describe in a little bit, that covers the entire area shown up here. So our boundaries cover Citrus Heights, Fair Oaks, Orangevale, City of Folsom north of the American River, and an area now called San Juan Retail. So yes, I'm somewhat schizophrenic. I've got two hats. I'm sometimes wholesale and I'm sometimes retail. So what do? San Juan Wholesale is responsible for the water supply reliability to all of the customers within all of those districts. Normally, that's not a real difficult job. However, in droughts like we have today, this has become quite an endeavor. We work significantly on statewide efforts. I like to say when I started at San Juan Water District, I ran a water district. Our job was to treat water, get it to the customers, make it so they turned on the faucet, and water came out. Now I am much more involved in dealing with statewide water rights and making sure that our water here in Folsom is kept for the benefit of all of you guys to use it. I like to say I get to, but I live in Newcastle. We also have to work federally quite a bit. The reason for that is the Bureau of Reclamation runs this dam. So I get a lot of phone calls that want to know why I'm letting all this water out on the American River. Just an FYI, the world was according to Shauna, now that water wouldn't be going out. We then take the water we get from Folsom, we treat it, and then we deliver it to Citrus Heights Water Districts, Fair Oaks Water District, Orangevale Water Company, City of Folsom, and San Juan Water District Retail. Once we deliver it to those agencies, it's then their job to get it to your faucet. So, how were we formed? I meant to change this slide because this is a slide that an engineer can only create, or maybe an attorney. I should be careful, that's my boss. So how were we formed? We were petitioned as a community service district by Citrus Heights, Fair Oaks, and Orangevale. They went out and got a petition of customers in order to create this agency. And they couldn't do it as a water district because there already was a water district serving all these areas. So they did it as a community service district, which means we are almost a city, but not quite, if we chose to be. That said, I have no interest in having police and fire and everything else. We focus on water only. There was an election, February 10th of 1953. We became organized on February 15th through a certificate of the county clerk with copies to the recorder, assessor, secretary of state, and state board of equalization. Boom. Ballot, vote in, agency, done. Wish it was that easy nowadays. So what's our current water supply situation? I don't know if there's a pointer on this thing or if I'm going to cause a problem, but the dashed red line with the little dots on it there, that's 76, 77. That was the most difficult drought we have had in California since Folsom Reservoir was built. The top line across the top is the capacity of Folsom. It's 977,000 acre feet. Yes, it looks like we almost topped it at one point. That's only because we used to think it was 1 million acre feet until they redid it with the sedimentation. The shaded in area is the average. I always consider the average a useless number because the average looks like it never gets full. Needless to say, we hope it does more often than that. The key element that you want to remember here is the dark blue. For some reason, the water year goes from October 1st until the end of September. It's not really for some reason, it's because that's the fiscal year for the United States government, and evidently we all decided that was a good time for a water year. But from October 1st, if you notice, we were tracking well below 76, 77 at that point. We came in at the end of last year, this time last year, lower than we were in 77, 76, 77. I'm sure you guys probably saw me on the news. I actually saw myself on the news in Pennsylvania discussing what was going on here at Folsom. So it dropped. We got some great rains that came in the early part of the year. Everybody thought, oh great water supply, we're off and running, right? Nope, because there was no snow. For those of you that don't know, snow is our biggest reservoir in California. That is why this year when we talk about the El Nino coming in and people say, great, we have lots of rain, the warm temperatures that go with it are the concern that most of us have. If we do get the rain and it's warm, it won't necessarily solve a lot of problems. So then we took this huge dive in Folsom that I'm sure you guys have all seen. We're just now starting to level off and reduce what's coming out of Folsom. The reason for that dive was because there's this thing called the Endangered Species Act, and that requires And no, we are not allowed to have any species ever go extinct. Now I want you guys to think about that, because I'm very pro-environment, probably more so than I should be as a GM of a water district. But if anybody finds a dinosaur right now, I've got a real problem. So what has happened? We have species on the Sacramento River that have had 2 or 3 really bad years. Now I'm not sure what would have happened to them had we not had dams, because there wouldn't be any water there. But our rules don't allow that to be considered. So as a result, they have to keep cold water in Shasta. The best way to keep cold water in Shasta is to keep a lot of water in Shasta, because then the heat can't make it warmer. Now a lot's relative right now, but. So they still have to keep the salt water out of the delta. So how do they do that? They release the water out of Folsom. So they released the water out of Folsom, which is why you saw that significant downturn. It's starting to go flatter. They changed the releases out of Folsom here to about 800 cubic feet per second. Figure 1 foot by 1 foot by 1 foot. 800 of them go by every second. They are now planning to reduce that down to, the plan said 500 CFS starting October. However, I found out Friday it's probably 800 this month. The next battle Bob gets to hear about. So what that was with the plan, in September, only the Bureau can have an average of 802. They're supposed to be at 800 CFS. The plan was to reduce it down to 500. At this time last year, we were at 1,500 CFS. So that's a success. The good news is people are realizing how important Folsom is, because everybody got a little bit scared last year. They're now saying 600 and see what happens. The reason I want you to notice this projection is, it says 1,000 acre feet, but effectively, we've never gone below 156,000 acre feet in Folsom since it was built. So according to the current plan, by the end of October, we're supposed to be at 150,000. However, they have decided that we can still provide water to us if we drop to 120,000 acre feet. So what this means is the fisheries agencies on the Lower American River have decided that the fisheries would be better off if we had more flow. So they're going to go, like I said, to 600 in October and see what happens in November and December. The concern is, if they keep it at 600, that's about 20,000 acre feet over those 3 months. Now if you look, it looks like that number starts to go up in December, right? That's because they're assuming we get rain in November and December. If we get rain in November and December, we're doing okay. Folsom fills fast. The problem is, what happens if we don't get rain? Now I'm getting ready to go. Enough of being formal. Okay, so what our concern is, let's say it doesn't increase after November. We're at 144. They released 20,000 extra feet in December. We're at 120,000 acre feet. That's 12% of capacity. What happens if next winter's dry? Okay, so this is why you've had Tom, I'm sure, Gray out there telling you guys why we have to do conservation. The main reason is, it's a very small amount of what's in Folsom. The real reason is if we weren't doing conservation, I couldn't be out there fighting to keep that water in Folsom, because most people out there think we waste water. We're in Northern California, our lawns are green, we use all the water we want, we don't conserve. Because everybody's done this conservation, you're setting me up to be able to do this fight. And so that's the reason that we've appreciated so much for all the conservation. So what's our outlook coming in this year? Well, this is on the website, it's updated periodically, it's about a 3-month outlook, and it effectively is showing that the drought is either going to remain or get worse in the next 3 months. It's through December. So there isn't a projection for this drought to become any better in the next 3 months. Remember that slide I just showed you a moment ago about looking to tick up? I'm hoping somebody in forecasting is wrong. However, I do have to say, this is kind of a fun one. I got an email today from the National Weather Service, and it says, don't pay attention to what we say for this weekend, because half of the models say it's going to be about 72, and the other half say it's going to be 92. Give up. So if we can't figure out what the weather's going to be this weekend, probably have no idea really what's going to happen here, right? But based on that, it's not looking great. However, the precipitation outlook is starting to slip up a little bit. It's looking like there is a better than average chance that we are going to be wetter this year. Currently, it's about a 75% chance it's going to be wet. This is due to that El Nino thing that you guys have been hearing out there with the really warm water. Now of concern is that the warm water translates to warm rain. So as we discussed before, that's more flooding, less snow. So we're hoping the rain comes through, we hope Folsom fills, but we also really need snow because we haven't built storage, as you guys have all heard for so long, and the snowpack is our storage. I feel like I've kind of been a little bit of a Debbie Downer, but where are we going this year? We've actually had some serious successes. We've been able to change the flows on the American River. It used to be 15 CFS the last 2 years of the drought. It's about 500, maybe 600 here now. This month it changed since I made the slide this morning. What did I do to it? Okay. The 1500 CFS to 500, so that has been a huge difference. People are starting to understand what Folsom is, why does it matter, and the fact that it serves water to almost 500,000 people. It's kind of a big deal. People have also begun to understand that temperatures are more important than flows. So they're willing to keep water back in storage so that we can keep the water cold, so that hopefully then we can have cold water for the fish. A whole bunch of fish coming back aren't any good if we boil them. So the idea here is we kind of like the fish to remain cold. We also have worked significantly. I know Mr. Gray in the back has worked a lot on the Water Forum. It's an agreement with public agencies, environmentalists, businesses, etc. on how can we develop a flow on the Lower American River that also protects storage at Folsom. It's much more technically complicated than it sounds, but it's something that we're starting to push, and especially with the discussions on the twin tunnels, people are really wanting to hear how we can do a better flow management standard on the Lower American River. As I mentioned before, there's become a huge statewide awareness on Folsom Lake water levels, and there's been a discussion about setting a minimum Folsom Lake level for December. Now that minimum that people are looking at is about 280,000 acre feet at the end of December. Why is that number important? Because we're currently hoping to be above 120. Now, that's a number after 2 years of drought. We have had 4. It would probably not be that good here, but if we hadn't drained it as low as we had 2 years ago, we probably wouldn't be at the point we are right now. So what that would do is it would alter the pattern of release. It means we would keep more of the reservoir into the fall, and when it starts raining, we can release a whole lot more because we now know we have rain and storage and snow, etc. And let's get that down into Southern California and into the storage areas down there when there's plenty here. That's better water management. One of the other successes we've discovered is that we need to do more conjunctive use. What's conjunctive use? That means in wet years, let's use all this surface water. And let's figure out how to use as much as we can in this area, so that in dry years, we could have stored up all the groundwater, and we can use a lot more groundwater in the dry years to provide reliability. This actually is capable of doing because San Juan Water District has adequate surface water supplies on paper. Paper is not all that helpful if there's nothing in the lake, but it means when there's water available, we have adequate, more than adequate supplies. So let's get it in the groundwater, let's get it stored, and then we can use it in the dry years. So those are some of the activities that we're moving forward. So overall, I've told I should probably aim for about a 15-minute presentation. I think I got it 14. So I can certainly answer some questions. I may call on Tom, I think he's trying to be incognito over there, but I'm kind of the base water supply person for this group, looking at Folsom Lake, making sure that we have pump back supplies in groundwater, working with Fair Oaks so that they have their groundwater wells, which they do a great job at. and able to supply a reliable water supply to you guys. I'm not the retailer, the person that actually takes the water from San Juan and delivers it to your faucet. That's Fair Oaks Water District. So, why does this matter to you? Because you guys all elect the directors of San Juan. That graph I showed back there that included Fair Oaks, you guys elect the directors to San Juan Water District, and you elect them to Fair Oaks Water District both. One of them delivers the water to your house, the other one takes care of the water supply and treats it and makes sure that it gets to those agencies that deliver it to your house. So therein is that surprise, and why you actually elect for 2 boards, it wasn't a mistake. So, oh, did you have a question?
So I don't understand how the twin tunnels helps.
That question always comes out. I'm not going to pretend that I have any idea about how it helps with the delta. Sir, you wanted to know how the question was, how do the twin tunnels help the delta? My comment is I'm doing all I can to figure out and make sure I fully understand water in this area. I don't understand the intricacies within the delta of the twin tunnels. What I do understand, if I put an engineering hat on, is if we can use as much surface water when it's wet, get that water in the ground, get it down to Southern California, get it into storage, so when it's dry, they don't take our water, and I'm saying that on purpose. When I say our water, it's actually their water too. They paid for the different facilities and the dams, but so they leave that water up here for those of us that is our only storage. So if in wet years it could go somewhere else, get stored, so that in dry years they don't take it, water works better. However, the key element there is making sure that how it's operated and what security do we have on how it's operated. Because as you guys all know, we don't have most of the votes in the state legislature. So these are some of the discussions we have to work through. Go ahead.
Do you know why all the lakes on the California aqueduct, I'm talking about Pyramid, Cascade, Quail Lake, Silver Lake, in Southern California are filled with the ground? That's because water's coming out of here?
And people always ask me this question, and I have got to have a better understanding fully of Southern California water. But a lot of the main reason is right now there's no water being pumped down there through the delta. They're almost at zero. The little bit that is going down those canals is health and safety or old pre-1914 water rights that some of the ag area has. What that means is they have the highest water rights, most secure. So but there still is very limited pumping. However, because of the gradient, you get this, but in the gradient in the canals, it looks like they're always full. And in reality, they're just moving very slow. Some of these lakes are full because 2 different reasons. Number one, during the time where we did have the wet water coming through, it happened to come, as you noticed on my slide, last fall. Not so much into the winter this year. So they did pump quite a bit to fill the lakes. That's a good thing, not a bad thing. The other reason is because they get water in Southern California metropolitan gets a lot of water off of the Colorado River. And they have been pumping a significant amount of water over from the Colorado River, as well as buying some additional water supply from agencies that are using groundwater instead. So
those lakes are not California aqueduct lakes. They're fed by AD Edmondson pumping plant, which is a 1,500-foot plant. Okay, they're all full.
They said they're not fed by, which I think you just said.
They're not fed by Colorado River at all.
They're not fed by Colorado River water. Then I don't know specifically why a lot of them are full. I can't give you that information. But if you'd like, I can certainly check into it and get it for you. Unfortunately, I don't run the water system in Southern California. So it sounds like you know too much. You already know the answer. Okay, well, what is it?
Trick question. I used to work for Water Resources. They're pumping water out of the delta and they're filling all those lakes out. That's the only way they can get water into those lakes, and they're all filled to the top.
They did during that winter rains.
After 4 years, they should not be full to the top.
Nope, they shouldn't. I think that's what's just been happening this winter. Now, truthfully, as you guys all know, Folsom is run by the Bureau of Reclamation, so I can answer all your questions related to the Bureau. If you have a question on DWR, the State Water Project, please ask him.
New implement pump or
Hopefully never.
What's the likelihood?
What the question is the pumps that are on Folsom that are being built, the likelihood. There initially was a plan to build a barge in Folsom, and the idea was to pump that then into our inlet that supplies both San Juan, City of Roseville, and City of Folsom, and Folsom Prison with water. The idea was, should it drop below our inlet, we have a hole in the dam. It's at a level where we used to say 100,000 acre feet. We probably can get water a little bit below that, but full water would have to be about 100,000 acre feet left in Folsom Dam. They realized that the issues of trying to figure out things like how do you get power out to those pumps if the lake's empty, because you can't get it there by boat, was a small problem. So instead, and they're very intelligent people in Denver with the Bureau that are figuring this out, they're putting the one pump on what I'm calling the mini barge that's over on the Folsom side, and it'll pump water 30 cubic feet per second. It'll pump water to both the City of Folsom and Folsom Prison. Hopefully they won't need to use that, I'll explain that in a minute. But that is supposed to work if the water gets down low enough to the hole in the dam that when they turn on the pumps, it kind of creates that vortex, kind of like your bathtub when you turn the drain on. You don't want to suck air. So when it gets down to where that's going to start, then they will flip over to, they have an emergency pump on the penstock, which is the pipe that comes out in order to do power on Folsom Dam. They have a pump on that that will pump into our pump station out. At the same time, you're going to start to see here in a month, about a month or so, a platform put on the downstream side of Folsom Dam. And on that side, they're going to put a platform that's capable to put pumps on, to pump up into our pump station. The idea would be, if the lake drops below our intake, that would be a supply to pump up and meet what I'm going to tell you right now is indoor water use. You know, if the lake drops below the intake, it means there's like 50,000 acre feet. Sounds like a lot. It's about the size of a football field, 50,000 feet high. Sounds pretty like a lot to me. San Juan Water District in a really dry year like this treats 43,000 acre feet. So what's left in there would be less than what us Folsom Roseville use, let alone anybody else. So if we get down below the intake, it means it's indoor use only, most likely. Maybe at that point they'd let us use groundwater and bring that up a little bit higher level of service, because I know Fair Oaks has groundwater wells. San Juan installed a pumping plant to pump groundwater back up, because they call it Granite Bay for a reason up where we are. It's because it's granite. It doesn't make a lot of water. In the very back?
What's the plan if we run out of water?
If the plan, if you mean if we run out of surface water, the really good news...
All water, let's say, is there.
Well, if we run all out of water, I'm moving. But short of that, the really good news is this area has done an excellent job of managing the groundwater basin. We aren't one of those basins that are dropping, causing buildings to fall in and stuff. Santa Clara has already dropped like 13 inches in 2 years. So that tells you, because they're pumping so much groundwater, that the ground is dropping to a lower level. It's not happening here. So the good news is Fair Oaks and Citrus Heights both have groundwater wells that will meet indoor water use for everybody. So they can pump groundwater, and there's a pretty long-term capabilities of that. San Juan, Orangevale, and Folsom have a sit-up to pump groundwater up from the central portion of the area here and pump it up so that we could meet indoor use also. So the plan is long-term, indoor good, outdoor pray for rain.
Mine is a multi-question. What has happened to the idea of the partnership with the Sacramento Water District to share? Also, is the Forebay Lake Tacoma useful for getting water for our area? And last of all, what's the effect of, I noticed there's new wells being drilled at Mount Vernon Cemetery, and our district has quite a few wells. How is that helping your situation?
Okay, I've got to remember, I've got my 3 fingers, so I know there were 3 questions. The first one was San Juan Water District. I think you're talking about we're looking at merging with Sac Suburban in order to use as much surface water as we could in wet years, because they're normally on groundwater wells. And then in dry, that would replenish the groundwater basin. So in dry years, we'd be able to have a really reliable groundwater supply also. That one is currently somewhat stalled for political reasons. I always say if you merge two districts, if the GMs are pushing for it, it's never been heard of before. Both the GM of Sac Suburban and San Juan were saying, do it, both of us will walk away from our job, it's the right thing to do. It's always politics. So it came down to the final one on that because we were ready to enter the next phase of study to answer some of our questions. Things like, how would financing work? You know, how would staffing work? How would all that work? That's the next step. It's stalled right now. Hopefully we can still figure out a way to do more groundwater baking on that level. It ties into what you talked about with Fair Oaks. Fair Oaks does have have groundwater wells, and they have done a good job of having an adequate supply for Fair Oaks for indoor use. Hopefully, I know Fair Oaks has been pushing for us to figure out a way to do more conjunctive use with Fair Oaks, meaning use more surface water in wet years and use groundwater in dry years and maybe inject also surface water in. So those are currently, we have a committee of our board that is meeting about every 3 weeks, and we're about to issue a request for proposals to get a consulting firm in to see the best way to do that kind of thing with or without Sacramento Suburban Water District.
And as far as Lake Matoma, I know Sacramento gets their water out of the river at various places.
Yeah, right. Lake Matoma for us, we don't have a right. California water rights are a little bit restrictive. I'm kind of being sarcastic there. And we can't pump out of Natoma. If there's an emergency, do we think someone would help set it up? Absolutely. And I do want to say when we did that other discussion about Sac Suburban and San Juan, that wasn't with Fair Oaks, so that would have been something entirely separate from you guys. Oh wait, I'm sorry, she was next, I forgot, sorry.
Yes, I have a real concern after hearing what Northern California is doing to save the water. We have son, daughter-in-law, and friends and family in Southern California. And what I'm hearing, they're not doing zilch.
I'm laughing because I had to go to an association of California water agencies last Friday.
They have a clue. They think we have water. They're under this misconception. So what I'm hearing back is really upsetting.
That we were livid. The people from up north that went down there and drove around,
Yeah.
some of them are doing an amazing job meeting their requirement.
Not
Right. But there are many others that have the green lawns and stuff. And that was one of the big issues that came up. We did hear that the state board is working with all of them on fines and stuff.
Fine.
You know,
Fine, and they have money. It doesn't matter.
yeah, it's a very aggravating, I'm talking for me now, not for my board. It's an aggravating process on how much we've all let our lawns and everything else go dead and the cost it's going to take to get those back. And looking at areas that aren't doing it as well. There are some that are doing it well. I don't want to be one size fits all, but there are many that are not doing as well. And there, truthfully, there's also people within our communities who I get the calls a lot that so-and-so's not doing it, why am I? It's a rough time, and I really wish everybody would do the right thing. I'm with you.
When you're talking about our worst scenario of indoor use only, can you define that? I mean, in Fair Oaks, like I have 11 oak trees in my backyard. Now, if nothing was watered and everything starts falling over, I mean, how do you define indoor, and at what point would you just be an indoor, and what couldn't you water?
I will try my best. Unfortunately, I don't get to decide, but it's the State Water Resource Control Board, the same one that just told us the 36% reduction that we're all on right now. But I think if it goes to where we're on the auxiliary pump stations and stuff at Folsom, we're going to be at a level where the governor's going to come into this one. My expectation is they're going to give us 8 gallons per person per day if we hit that point. Now let me say, as long as it's not really dry next spring, we shouldn't hit that point. If it becomes dry, like I said, I wish I could forecast the weather, but I can't. I've decided to make a lot of vacation plans, hoping it'll rain them out. But indoor water use with health and safety, many people call that 55 gallons per person per day. That sounds like an awful lot of water when you talk about it, but the average in the wholesale service area that we showed you is more like 300 gallons per person per day. So, and that's the average. So that means there's a lot more and there's a lot less. 55 gallons per person today would mean you are standing in a bucket while you're showering. So this is the reason why, I don't want to be the downer person here, I am out there constantly, and I'm on my computer is a letter to get on record against them releasing this water. Already planning DC trips, because I'm going to have congressional people writing letters about all this. I'm going to try to get congressional representatives down at the state board, our elected officials doing it. It helped last year. We were at 1,500, like I told you, CFS, and a year and a half ago I drove up and down California. It was in the summer. I brought my daughter. She could have killed me. But we went to every single GM of all the large agencies to explain what was going on at Folsom Lake and why I was scared. And it made a huge difference because it was the one-on-one personal relationship thing. So this year, people already know about it. But I am a little bit concerned because they just told me they're not going to go to 500 and they're going to go to 600. So that's what today was spent on, and I'm guessing the next 2 weeks.
What's the reason, I mean, I know it's old, but the reason for releasing 1,500 2 years ago? I mean, what was the logic behind that? Because 2 years ago we were drought.
It's sometimes for the fisheries on the lower American River, but it is more often to keep the salt water out of the Delta. And what I do want to say is when you're dealing with environmental concerns, there's two different sides to things. One side is mine. I'm the engineer, planner. I want to know that we have enough water for a 20-year drought, right? Then there's the other ones which are saying if there's not adequate water to this fish, it's not going to make it. We need to give it everything we can to make sure it makes it, because odds are it's going to rain. And odds are it is going to rain. The odds are much better for that. But it's two competing interests that occur. So the fact that we're at 600, I want this at 500 and I'm going to work on it, is huge. We can't go below that legally. 500 is the lowest. And I say we, because that's the way I talk, but we need to get the Bureau and the fisheries agencies.
And subsequent to that, you mentioned releasing 500 CFS. What are the what-ifs? You mentioned those a couple times. What-ifs. What do you think they are?
What are the what-ifs, meaning?
Just going to 500.
I think what she said is what are the what-ifs for going to 500? I think what's happening here is Folsom was initially a few months ago, and I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I'll try, was aiming to hit, we were afraid it was going to hit 120,000 acre feet by the end of September. That is unbelievably low, right? Well, they've done better than that. Just because with Folsom, with conservation, with the way the salt water and the moon and tides and everything have worked, they've done better. My thought was, well, thank God, because we're not talking like great. We're talking from, I like to say, oh crap, to, okay, kind of above oh crap. But they consider that that's extra water now in fisheries agencies. So now they're figuring that that's water to release because we're still above that 120. So my daily battle is, and I hate to say it, I sometimes feel like I'm out there and people say, well, you're just trying to kill the fish. Well, someone whose husband's a fisherman and very pro-environment, this is very difficult. But my comment is we have to plan for next year being a drought. I pray to God it snows and rains and flood control can have the stress for the next 4 years. I want to be over it. But if it doesn't, we have to have something to make sure that we're good. The good news for this area is we have groundwater. You know, you hear of all these communities that their wells have gone dry and they don't have any water in their houses. That isn't going to happen here unless Tom knows something I don't know. I think he's done an excellent job of getting some groundwater and stuff in here. So we will have indoor use.
What did the fish do before we built dams? Does anybody know?
You know, I made the mistake of asking that once. The question was, what did the fish do before we had dams? And when I first started, I was a little naive about asking questions of environmentalists. I mean, a couple of them I shouldn't have asked. That was one of them. Their comments were, before you had dams, the fish used to be able to get all the way out much further, so there's cold water. Now my question was, how did they get back down if there's no water in the rivers? The honest answer I'm going to say is I have no idea what their answer meant, so I can't tell you. We all know the stories of walking across the walking across the American River and pictures of it. So, you know, they say the fishery will go extinct in 3 years, because that's the cycle for return. It comes back every 3 years, so if you kill 3 years in a row, you've lost it all. Well, they talk about these horrible droughts we've had. So I don't know if either A, they didn't make it through, and that's how you had extinction in different species, or whether they had a way to get through it. I really don't know. But the Endangered Species Act requires us to keep everything as it is. You know, nothing can evolve.
No more efforts.
Yes, sir.
How about